Special thanks to Berilo for submitting this story. If you have your own tale that you'd like Restless Shadows to share, you can do that via our website. The link is in the description down below. This is a true story that happened to me. It all occurred several years ago when I was but a child, or a teenager if I am to be more exact. I always have trouble differentiating a kid from a teen, since, to me, they're all children. And I still remember exactly how old I was back then, which goes to show just how much this event had an impact on me. I was 14 years old at that time. A new year had just begun. It was around the second or third week of January, and I was in the middle of my school holidays. I had just finished middle school and was about to enter high school. And to enjoy my time off, I went to visit a few relatives of mine, more precisely my cousin, who was around my age and was also on break from school, my aunt, who coincidentally was on annual leave from her work, and my grandmother, who is now deceased but at the time was retired. Since we were all on leave from our obligations, my aunt decided we should celebrate by renting a small family farm, together with a few friends and co-workers of hers that were also on annual leave, for a week or two. Basically, my aunt wanted us, me, my cousin, my grandmother, and herself, to go to a vacation home to enjoy our free time. And so we did. However, no one in our group was exactly rich, which included us and my aunt's friends and co-workers, so we could only afford a humble cottage almost in the middle of nowhere. But even though the rented small family farm was clearly isolated from modern civilization, it was still charming and cozy. The house itself was spacious and well maintained. As for the land, it contained a pool, a small lake nearby, and large open fields with a soccer field there as well. In short, although that vacation home was tremendously far in the boonies, it was still a wonderful place to enjoy our free time. Or, at least, that's how I remember it. I had a lot of fun in that place during my stay there. Some of my aunt's friends and co-workers had children of their own too, which they all brought to the vacation home as well. In total, I believe there were around 6 or 7 kids in the same house, counting me and my cousin. Most of the kids were younger than me and my cousins, save for 2 girls who were around our age. I prefer not to reveal their names, so I'll just refer to them as Girl A and Girl B. Girl A was tremendously beautiful, and I remember being instantly attracted and or even falling in love with her at first sight. However, I wasn't alone on that, as my cousin also really liked her. He claimed that he wasn't in love, that he was just attracted to her, but I knew that was bullshit. I could see just how much my cousin cared for Girl A, and I believe she might have even been his first great love. Seeing that made me want to step down and not get in the way between my cousin and Girl A. I really liked my cousin back then, not only as a relative, but as a good friend, so I didn't mind giving up my love for Girl A for him. It wasn't until years later that I found out that Girl A actually liked me too, more than she ever did my cousin. But never mind that, that's maybe a story for another time. The point is that me and Girl B, as well as my cousin and Girl A, formed a group together, and we were also couples. Not in a hardcore way, since there were parents around. It was much more innocent, meaning we would just hold hands and kiss at most. I had nothing against Girl B. She wasn't ugly or anything, but she just couldn't compare to Girl A, at least not in my mind. And I wasn't in love with her either, meaning that we weren't exactly the best couple to ever have walked this earth, since I literally couldn't care less about her. I know this is a horrible thing to say, but that's just how I felt back then. Nevertheless, our group had a lot of fun together. We would play at the pool, at the lake, on the open fields, which included the soccer field too, and have as much enjoyment as only kids know how to do. I remember that some of the children also brought a few tabletop games, as well as video games. In short, we had a really good time at the vacation home. Or at least, that was the case for me and my cousin. However, this is where things started getting weird. From this point on, my memory isn't the most reliable or trustworthy. Although I try my damnedest to remember, my memories for what happened next are fuzzy and confused. No matter what I do, I just can't seem to recall the exact events of what occurred afterward. It's almost as if it all went on in a dream, even though I know it was real. But that doesn't mean I have no recollection of what happened, as I still remember the gist of it. As I recall, it all began a few days after we arrived at the vacation home. I don't remember who started it, but someone from our group, meaning me, my cousin Girl A and Girl B, suddenly brought up the subject of ghost stories, or spirit talks to be more exact. We would share our experiences, which were either meager or non-existent, with one another about communing with the dead, seances, psychography, spirit writing, and anything else we could think of that involved the realm of the dead. Up until that point, things weren't necessarily out of the ordinary, as I find, from my experience, that many kids, especially around that age, may develop an interest in the occult and or in ghost stories. But the problem was, at least from my perspective, that our group had an unnatural desire or thirst for more information or knowledge of the supernatural. It wasn't just silly ghost stories that children share around campfires. It was a paranoia for the dead. The more we learned from one another, the more questions we had that would further feed into our deep curiosity and desire for spiritual connection. Also, the funny thing was, we wouldn't share that with any of the adults present, keeping it only to ourselves in secret. Eventually, our group wanted to attempt communicating with the dead, and at that moment, the subject of a Ouija board came into play. Naturally, there weren't any of those spirit boards at the vacation home, and no one had bought one either, but that didn't stop us, as we decided to make one ourselves. We would make our own homemade Ouija board. Back then, there wasn't any internet or cell phone signal available at the small family farm, so we couldn't even look up the design or layout of a Ouija board. But even so, our group still didn't give up, and we decided to make one anyway, using only our knowledge and memories as reference. I remember that we made a rough sketch of the spirit board on a sheet of paper, which ended up pretty good, all things considered, as well as gathering a bunch of materials to craft it, such as cardboard, glue, and a thin and small rectangular piece of wood. Surprisingly enough, everything was going smoothly to the making of the homemade Ouija board. In retrospect, that was also odd. Considering all the difficulties we had to make the damn thing, it was almost as if our group had some sort of external, spiritual help. As we crafted the spirit board, our group started talking about where and when we should use it. We wanted a time and a place that would be most suitable and effective for its use. And after much thinking, we decided to do our seance, or at least our attempt at one, at midnight, right in the middle of the soccer field. Even though I try really hard to recall, I still have no idea who among our group had that brilliant, as well as terrifying, idea. I think it might have been me, but I can't for the life of me remember. After everything was settled with our procedure for the seance, all that remained was for us to finish our homemade Ouija board. However, that was when our plans were completely thwarted. Somehow, my grandmother had found out what we were up to and decided to immediately put a stop to it. Even today, I still don't know how my grandmother came to know, but more than likely, someone from our group ratted us out, and if I had to guess, it was probably my cousin. My grandmother was a very religious woman, and she probably thought that our group intended to do some kind of demonic or satanic ritual. Needless to say, she put a stop to it completely, forbidding us from doing so without even hearing what we had to say. My grandmother was normally a very calm and collected old lady, but that day was one of the rare times I saw her angry. And that was it. That was the end of our little attempt at a seance. Our group wouldn't even talk about anything spiritual or supernatural anymore. We just gave up on all of that entirely. However, contrary to what one might think, this is not the end of this story. If it was, then it would have never had such an impact on me. After being denied our spiritual session, I was really bummed out, and I decided to sleep early that day. I was looking forward so much to our seance, since it would have been the first time I ever used a Ouija board, that even now, I still clearly remember how sad I was to not have been allowed to do it. Looking back, the amount of sadness I felt might have also been a bit unnatural. It was as if I had lost something tremendously important to me. Since I went to sleep early, I ended up waking up in the middle of the night. It was around 2 a.m. when I got out of bed, or more precisely, a hammock. There weren't enough beds in the house for everybody, so I had to sleep on a hammock. I remember being quite thirsty at that time, so I headed straight to the kitchen to drink a glass of water. As I got there, I was met with a strange sight. There was a chair next to the fridge. I wanted some cold water from the refrigerator, and sitting on it was my cousin. In retrospect, I should have definitely found that strange, but since I had just woken up, I was a little bit groggy and I didn't think twice about it. My cousin was staring at me hard. It was honestly creepy, almost as if he was glaring at my soul. And I felt so intimidated, as he was much taller and stronger than me, that I instinctively looked away, choosing not to make eye contact with him anymore. I wouldn't even move my eyes towards him at all, as I was afraid to make him angry if I did. As I poured myself a glass of cold water from the fridge, I decided to lighten the mood by attempting to make some small talk with my cousin. I recall thinking that maybe he was mad with me about something I did, so trying to have a conversation with him could, in my mind, help out in that regard. I believe I talked about several different topics all at once, varying from his love for girl A, which he wouldn't admit, to what a shame it was that our group was denied our seance. I wanted to make enough small talk so that my cousin would, perhaps, forget about whatever it was that I might have done to him, and consequently stop him from staring at me with basically murderous intentions in his eyes. However, no matter how much I tried to strike up a conversation, I would get no response from my cousin. Feeling apprehensive, I mustered all of my courage and decided to face my cousin again, to ask him what was wrong and why he was glaring daggers at me. But as I turned towards him, I gasped, completely baffled by what I saw, or more specifically, for what I didn't see, as there was no one sitting on that chair next to the fridge. It was entirely empty, and my cousin wasn't even there. Although I was a bit groggy from having just woken up, I knew for sure that someone had been there sitting on that chair. It was no hallucination or trick of the light. Somebody was there, impersonating my cousin. Even today, many years later, I'm still convinced and convicted that there's no way in hell that there wasn't a person or a being sitting on that chair. Someone or something had been there staring intensely at me. Of this, I am absolutely certain. In any way, to conclude, I rarely talk about this event of my life with anyone, because every time I do, I get frightened remembering those intense eyes that stared deep at my soul. But if there's one thing that I'm grateful for, it's that my grandmother forbade us from performing our seance. God only knows what might have happened if our group had gone through with it. Maybe this vision I had or this presence I saw would have become much more comfortable around us. Maybe it would have appeared to our group more times. Or maybe it would have done something unspeakable that I shudder to even think of what it might have been.